It was the last day of school, 2014, the kind of day that's supposed to be filled with excitement, and yet there I was, staying late in the classroom. I'm Sarah, a shy junior, just trying to help my English teacher, Mr. Graham, clean up. The hallways were empty, echoing with every creak of the old building. That's when I noticed something strange. Mr. Graham wasn't moving. He was staring down the hallway, frozen. I followed his gaze. A man stood by the lockers, but he wasn't a student or a teacher. He just stood there, unmoving. Mr. Graham called out, but the man didn't respond. He simply tilted his head like he was listening to something we couldn't hear. And then, just like that, he walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Mr. Graham, looking pale and uneasy, told me to wait in the classroom while he went to investigate. I waited and waited. Minutes felt like hours. I couldn't just sit there. Something felt wrong. I stepped into the hallway, and that's when I saw it, smeared on the lockers, dark red streaks. I froze. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it. I turned to head back to the classroom, but that's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me, soft but unmistakable. I spun around, and no one was there. The hallway was empty, but the air, it felt so thick, so suffocating. I ran back to the classroom, my heart pounding in my chest. The police arrived later, after the janitor made the call. They found Mr. Graham unconscious in the basement, his head bloodied. But the man we saw, he was never identified. And the rumors? They said he might have been connected to a series of unsolved murders in the area. To this day, I can't go back to that school, not even for reunions. I still hear those footsteps. That same year, at the last assembly, I was in the gym, waiting with the rest of my classmates. Mark here, he was just like me, ready for the year to end. But then, something strange happened. As he walked to his locker, the old school lights flickered, the kind of thing you don't think twice about in a building that old. But that day, something felt off. A chill ran down his spine as he reached for his yearbook. But when Mark opened his locker, he found something weird. His yearbook, but it wasn't the one everyone else had. It was old. The logo on the cover was faded, and when he opened it, the names in the pictures, they were strangers, students from decades ago. And then he turned to the last page, and there he was, his own photo. But it wasn't one he recognized. He looked different, pale, his eyes lifeless, and the date beneath it, June 12th, 1986. Mark thought it was a prank, but when he showed his friends, the yearbook turned back to normal. The same one everyone had, nothing unusual. But that night, he had a nightmare. He was back in the hallway, the one with the flickering lights, and in his dream he heard voices calling his name. When he woke up, there was a missed call on his phone at 3:33 a.m. The caller ID. Unknown yearbook office. I don't think I'll ever understand what happened that day, but I don't think Mark will ever forget it either. Emma and her friends weren't exactly the best students. They spent their last day of junior year doing something less than scholarly. They decided to break into the old, unused locker room in the basement, the one that had been closed off after a tragedy years before, the one with a pool that had once claimed a student's life. The air was thick with mildew as they explored. The lockers were broken, the tiles cracked, and that's when Emma felt something pulling her toward locker 113. It creaked open, and out fell an old soaked shoe. She picked it up, and the temperature dropped instantly. Something brushed against her arm, and she screamed. Her friends laughed. They thought it was just her imagination. But then they heard it, a faint splashing sound coming from the pool. But the pool had been drained for years. Suddenly their phone lights flickered, and then they saw it in the corner. A figure, shadowy, wet, and unmoving. One of Emma's friends bolted, and they all ran, leaving the locker room behind. But later that night, Emma got a text, an unknown number. It simply said, "You forgot your shoe." Jessica was supposed to have a quiet last day. She had already finished her final exam and spent the class watching a movie. But then, Mr. Reynolds handed her a slip of paper before the bell rang. He said something strange. "You might need this after school." She didn't think much of it, but she should have. She walked home alone that evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the school. And that's when she felt it. Someone was following her. Every time she glanced behind, the footsteps grew louder, but there was no one there. She turned a corner and suddenly, there he was, Mr. Reynolds, standing in the dark. "You kept the note. Good," he said, his voice cold and distant. The hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long. The walls twisted, and faces of unknown students appeared, their eyes wide with terror. "Don't worry, Jessica," Mr. Reynolds whispered. "You'll join them soon. The lesson is eternal." When she woke, she was back in the classroom. The chalkboard read, June 13th, 1985. The students began filing in. One girl smiled and asked, "Is it true the teacher never left?" Jessica's heart froze. She was trapped in a lesson that never ended. Rachel never thought the last day of school would end like this. Nina, one of her classmates, was missing. She searched for her, but Nina's locker was wide open. No backpack, no jacket, just an old photograph on the bottom shelf. It was Nina, but not quite. Her eyes were hollow. The air grew colder. Suddenly the door slammed shut, and Rachel turned to find herself alone in the hallway. The lights flickered, and shadows seemed to move on their own. The school no longer felt familiar. It was wrong. Then she saw Nina, standing at the end of the hall, her skin pale, her eyes glowing. "You should have left when you had the chance," Nina said, her voice distant and distorted. "The school will never let us go. We're all trapped here forever." And that is the truth behind the last days of school. We've all heard the rumors, the ghost stories, the ones about things that can't be explained. But maybe, just maybe, there's more to these tales than we think. Look sharp, keep your wits about you, and always be wary of your surroundings. With that being said, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and share amongst those you love that fall into this category. Oh, and don't forget the bell icon. Click that to get notified about my next upload. But as I always say, we're always watching.